On Thursday, Bolivia begins the so-called electoral silence of the eve of the upcoming general elections. This Thursday, the World Health Organization's European office expresses great concern at soaring number of COVID-19 infections in the continent. On Thursday, schools in Uganda reopened after a 7-month break, despite rising coronavirus infections across the country. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. This Thursday, Bolivia begins the so-called electoral silence on the eve of the October 18 general elections. The measure that governs the electoral regulation prohibits proselytizing acts. In this context, political organizations closed their presidential campaign on Wednesday. Carlos Mesa, the candidate of the Citizen Community Coalition, stated that his party is the only one capable of facing the movement towards socialism. For his part, the MAS candidate, Luis Arce, said that if he is elected as president, he will focus on the country's economic recovery. Likewise, Arce said that the movement will address the economic recovery of the country so that Bolivia can retake the social and economic indicators that enjoyed during the government of former President Evo Morales.
When we took office in 2006 with Brother Evo, we also found a broken country, a country that had no future, a country that had no money or resources. And we worked day and night, long hours, risking our lives to move the country forward, and we did it. We had the best economy and social indicators in the history of the country, and today, sisters and brothers, we have the same challenge because they are going to hand over a broken country, a country without resources. We are going to work and we are going to once again take the country forward.
In Honduras, social organizations denounced Thursday the murder of environmental activist Arnold Joaquín Morazán Erazo. The crime occurred early Thursday morning in the city of Tocoa. Morazán Erazo was part of the 32-people group charged in the W.H.O case filed. So far, the causes of the murder are unknown. According to local media, Erazo died after receiving several gunshots. The Center of the Study of Democracy warned that the murder of Erazo adds to the actions of harassment, persecution, criminalization and prosecution of the 12 defenders and leaders of W.H.O who have been imprisoned for almost a year. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, offered an update on the clinical trials of the Russian COVID-19 vaccine candidate Sputnik V this Wednesday, which are being conducted across the nation.
La vacuna rusa está en Venezuela.
The Russian vaccine is already in Venezuela. The clinical trials are already starting. 2,000 volunteers. We have the volunteers. Several thousand doses of the vaccine. After the conclusion of Phase 3 of the Russian vaccine trial and that of the Chinese vaccine, in due time, the mass vaccination campaign will be conducted with the authorization of the WHO and PAHO.
And in Colombia, the indigenous mobilization known as Minga held its last activity in the city of Cali before leaving for Bogotá, a move taken after President Iván Duque refused to meet with the indigenous and campesino organizations. Our correspondent Hernán Tobar brings us the details.
The Minga, which ancestrally is a practice of collective work that seeks the well-being of indigenous communities, has traditionally been used to sow to open roads. Thus, the Minga of the Southwest, which today is being joined by more sectors and social movement, is constituted as a tool of political resistance.
Minga means walking together, fighting together and building processes together. It is a cultural practice, but then it also became a process of resistance.
This Minga, which departed from Cauca to Cali, the capital of the department of Valle del Cauca, demanded a meeting with President Duque to promote a debate about violence and the violation of human rights in their territories. However, given the president's refusal to engage in dialogue, it will finally depart for the Colombian capital.
Before the world, we will make clear that there is an incapable government that does not even have the capacity to hold a debate with the people. That is why the country has become too much for him to handle. That is why the country is as it is, from bad to worse. And today the Minga is moving forward smoothly, until they come out to point out and justify their massacre by saying that we are infiltrated.
Before departing for Bogota, in a journey of at least 453 kilometers, members of the Minga assured they are prepared for the road as they historically have been, voicing their social demands and their right to life.
What are we expecting with our arrival in the country's capital? That the President of the Republic faces the Colombian people, not only the southwestern Minga and the national uprising that is currently taking place in Colombia, but also each and every one of the Colombian citizens, because serious structural things are happening that are jeopardizing our democracy.
It is expected that this Thursday, October 15th, the caravan of the members of the indigenous and social Minga will begin to arrive in Bogota for a gathering, while President Duque has not confirmed any meeting with the Minga in the Colombian capital.
TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Britain's Health Secretary has shifted London into the second highest COVID-19 alert level amid a rise in cases. Health Secretary Matt Hancock told the House of Commons that the government acted to place London on level high because of infection rates are rising rapidly in the capital and swift action was necessary to control the virus. The move comes as millions of people in northern England are waiting to find out whether they will place it under the government's tightest COVID-19 restrictions, which the city of Liverpool already faces.
The central change is that people cannot now meet other households socially indoors. This applies in any setting, at home or in a restaurant or in any other venue. The rule of 6 still applies in any outdoor setting. And although you may continue to travel to open venues, you should reduce the number of journeys where possible. Now, I know that these measures are not easy, but I also know that they are vital.
Poland has again reported record new coronavirus infections, with most cases found in the large cities of Warsaw and Krakow. Wednesday saw the Polish Ministry of Health report over 8,000 new COVID-19 cases, with 84 deaths after around 64,000 tests were carried out in the 24 hours. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Health claims that there are no large coronavirus clusters, but the highest number of new infections occurred in the large cities. The official added that the Ministry of Health will announce an updated list of red zones with tiny measures in the coming days, which will include more than 100 areas. Krakow authorities announced that the city is working on establishing new hospitals to handle the increasing flux of patients.
The situation is developing quite alarmingly in 2 areas where we have the largest Polish cities. In Mazowice, we have more than 1,100 new cases of coronavirus and a similar number in Malopolska, in the southern part of the country. These results are influenced by the capital cities of these provinces. In Mazowice, 720 infections were reported in Warsaw alone, while in Malopolska there were 499 infections in Krakow. The situation is very serious. Yesterday's daily numbers are terrifying. Yesterday, 500 cases in the city were reported. This is actually a lot. Hospital beds for COVID patients were practically all occupied yesterday. We have to provide free beds. There is a concept to create new hospitals and we are working on it.
The European Union reminded its members on Thursday of the commitment to make COVID-19 vaccinations a public good in affordability and accessibility on an international scale. To combat the new surge of infections, many European nations have reintroduced unpopular restrictive measures, including closing schools, bars and gyms. The European Commission has secured several deals with pharmaceutical companies, allowing its 27 member states to buy nearly 1 billion doses of a potential coronavirus vaccine. The Commission said once a vaccine is ready, member states should give priority access to groups including healthcare workers and people over 60 years.
We do not yet have a safe and effective vaccine against COVID-19, but we're doing everything we can to ensure that at least one is produced as quickly and as safely as possible. Vaccination is not going to be a quick fix solution, but it will play a central role in saving lives, in containing the pandemic, in protecting healthcare systems, and in helping to restore our economy. It will provide citizens with a sense of hope and what they also need, predictability in their lives.
We want a vaccine quickly, yes, but we want a vaccine that is safe. So safety is our top priority. And in the initiative, we propose to monitor the performance of vaccination through rules and to ensure clear and timely information to the public. We want also a vaccine that is affordable and accessible. And we stand by the principle of vaccines free of charge and of physical proximity to the population to ensure that they reach every person in the EU. And we repeat our commitment for vaccines to become a public good by recalling our international efforts.
And the European Health Commissioner Stella Kyriakides called on EU member states to do what is necessary to avoid a new generalized lockdown in view of the resurgence of COVID-19 across the continent.
So my first message to member states today is one of urgency. We are quickly running out of time. Everyone needs to do what is necessary to avoid the devastating health, social and economic effects of a generalized lockdown.
And this Thursday, the World Health Organization's European office said that the soaring number of COVID-19 cases in the continent was of great concern.
Numbers of cases are up, hospital admissions are up, and COVID is now the 5th leading cause of deaths, and the bar of 8,000 deaths per day has now been reached. The region has registered the highest weekly incidence of COVID-19 cases since the beginning of the pandemic, with almost 700,000 cases reported. Confirmed cases have now surpassed 7 million, moving from 6 to 7 million cases in just 10 days. We record 2 to 3 times more cases per day compared to the April peak. We still observe 5 times less deaths, and the doubling time in hospital admissions is still 2 to 3 times longer.
This Thursday, China strongly denounced the U.S. interference in the Asian nation's internal affairs.
Tibetan affairs are wholly China's internal affairs and allow for no interference from any external forces. The U.S. designation of a so-called special coordinator for Tibet affairs is wholly political manipulation and aimed at interfering in China's internal affairs and destroying the development and stability of Tibet. China has resolutely opposed this throughout and has never given recognition to this. China firmly opposes and strongly condemns the so-called Hong Kong Autonomy Act concocted by the United States and the sanction of Chinese personnel according to that law. China has lost solemn representations with the United States. The United States should correct its mistakes and stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs and China's internal affairs in any way. If the US insists on going its own way, China will take resolute countermeasures to safeguard national sovereignty and security interests and safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies and related personnel.
And we have more stories coming up after this final break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday, schools in Uganda reopened after a 7-month break, despite rising coronavirus infections across the nation. The government has allowed schools to resume finalist and candidate classes for now, with no date announced yet for the return of other students. According to the Education Ministry, schools were ordered to ensure COVID-19 safety measures before reopening, including hand-washing facilities, temperature measuring devices, and availability of face masks. Many parents opposed to the decision to reopen schools, saying they can prove unsafe as virus cases have spiked in Uganda over recent weeks. So far, the nation has reported over 10,000 COVID-19 cases and 95 deaths. Lebanon's parliament speaker met on Thursday a U.S. official visiting the country, a day after Beirut began indirect negotiations with Israel over the disputed maritime border. Assistant of the U.S. Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, David Snecker, the top American diplomat for the Middle East, did not speak to reporters after his meeting with Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri. On Wednesday, Snecker attended to the opening session of the U.S.-mediated talks between Lebanon and Israel in an UN compound in the border area known as Ras Nakura. Israel and Lebanon have no diplomatic relationships and are technically in a state of war. They each claim about 860 square kilometers of the Mediterranean Sea as being within their own exclusive economic zones. In Yemen, a landmark prisoner exchange between the government and Houthi forces began Thursday, with hundreds of combatants heading home. The swap is a sign of progress in the process to end the conflict, which broke out 6 years ago. The warring sides agreed to exchange more than 1,000 prisoners under a deal struck in Switzerland last month. The International Committee of the Red Cross is handling the logistics of the complex 2-day operation. The planned prisoner exchange comes after the release of Wednesday of 2 U.S. citizens held captive in Yemen in exchange for some 240 Houthi supporters who were allowed to return home after being stranded in Oman. In Afghanistan, local police chief Hekmatullah Kuchi said Thursday that 41 people were killed in an attack against a police station in Qulat. The station, located in the Zabul province, was assaulted by members of an unidentified armored organization. The assailants detonated a truck loaded with explosives in front of the police station. According to the local police chief, Hekmatullah, 15 insurgents were killed and another 15 were injured. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet called on governments worldwide to redouble their efforts to prevent rape and other forms of sexual violence, improve access to justice and reparation for victims, and ensure prompt criminal investigations and prosecutions of perpetrators.
In the wake of numerous reports of horrific rapes in various parts of the world in recent weeks, people have rightly been outraged and are demanding justice for the victims and measures to prevent sexual assaults. I share the outrage and stand in solidarity with the survivors and with those demanding justice. But I am concerned that there are also calls, and in some places laws already being adopted, bringing in cruel and inhuman punishments and the death penalty for perpetrators. The main argument being made for the death penalty is for it to deter rape, but in fact, There's no evidence that the death penalty deters crime more than other forms of punishment. Evidence shows that the certainty of punishment, rather than its severity, deters crime. In most countries around the world, the key problem is that victims of sexual violence do not have access to justice in the first place, whether due to a stigma, fear of reprisals, entrenched gender stereotypes and power imbalances, lack of police and judicial training, laws that condone or excuse certain types of sexual violence, or the lack of protection for victims. The death penalty consistently and disproportionately discriminates against the poor and most marginalized individuals and often results in further human rights violations. I urge states to adopt a victim-centered approach to fighting the scourge of rape and other sexual violence. It is crucial that women are active participants in designing measures to prevent and address these crimes, and that law enforcement and judicial officials receive the requisite training in handling such cases. Tempting as it may be to impose draconian punishment on those who carry out such monstrous acts, we must not allow ourselves to commit further violations.
Several areas have been flooded and close to 1 million people have been impacted by heavy rains and rising waters in central Vietnam since mid-last week. At least 36 people have died and 30 are still missing due to the flood, according to Vietnam's Disaster Management Authority. Images show locals in the city of W.H.O cooking and making tea on a small boat inside their partially submerged homes. Close to 1 million people have been impacted by heavy downpours and rising waters since mid-last week, with 200,000 homes flooded, according to the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Vietnam is prone to natural disasters and is often affected by more than a dozen storms each year, regularly bringing flooding and landslides. Strong winds and heavy rain have killed at least 23 people in the southern state of Telangana in India. Hyderabad City reported at least 18 deaths, while government sources said that the toll could rise as more than 8 people have been reported missing in the floods. Residents were also found stranded in their homes with no access to electricity and broadband connection for more than 48 hours. Government officials have declared a 2-day holiday for the state-owned offices and private institutions across the state, while residents were also advised to stay indoors. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also, you can find us in social media and join us in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.